I am going to show you the true story of Joseph of Egypt in the light of the Holy Bible. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos, because this could completely change the way you see and understand the Word of God. Jacob lived in the land of Canaan, where his father had also lived as a foreigner. This is the story of Jacob's family. Joseph was 17 years old and helped his brothers take care of the sheep. He worked with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. But Joseph used to tell his father whenever he saw something wrong in his brothers. If you have been following this story from the beginning, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, because each part of it reveals something deep about purpose and destiny. Jacob loved Joseph more than all his other sons, because he was already older when Joseph was born. So he gave him a special robe, very beautiful and colorful. When the brothers saw that their father loved Joseph more, they began to hate him and could not even speak to him in a friendly way. Joseph had a dream and told it to his brothers, and it made them hate him even more. He said, "Listen to the dream I had. We were in the field tying bundles of wheat, and my bundle stood up, while yours bowed down to mine." The brothers replied, "So you think you're going to rule over us?" And they became even more outraged with him. Later, Joseph had another dream and told it as well. "I dreamed that the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told this to his father and brothers, his father rebuked him. "What kind of dream is this? Will I, your mother, and your brothers bow down to you?" The brothers became envious, but his father kept thinking about it in silence. And here begins an important turning point in the story. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel, because what comes next shows how God guides even the most difficult moments. One day, Joseph's brothers went to take care of the sheep near Shechem. Jacob said to Joseph, "Your brothers are there. Go to them and see if everything is all right, then come back and tell me." Joseph replied, "Sure, I'll go." So he went. A man found Joseph wandering in the field and asked what he was looking for. Joseph replied, "I am looking for my brothers. Do you know where they are?" The man said, "They have gone to Dothan." So Joseph went after them and found them there. When the brothers saw Joseph coming from a distance, they began to plot against him. They said, "Look, here comes that dreamer. Let's kill him and throw him into a pit. Then we'll say that a wild animal attacked him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." But Reuben, one of the brothers, tried to stop them and said, "Let's not kill him." Reuben suggested, "Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't hurt him." He planned to rescue Joseph later and return him to his father. When Joseph arrived, the brothers tore off his special robe. If you are noticing how intense the situation is getting, go ahead and subscribe to the channel now, because the story is still going to surprise you a lot. They grabbed him and threw him into an empty pit with no water. After that, they sat down to eat as if nothing had happened. While they were eating, they saw a caravan of merchants coming from Gilead, carrying spices and goods to Egypt. Then Judah spoke up, "What do we gain by killing our brother? Let's sell him to these merchants. That way, we won't be guilty of killing him." The brothers agreed. When the merchants passed by, they pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for silver. Joseph was taken to Egypt. Reuben returned to the pit later and saw that Joseph was no longer there. He was desperate and tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone. What am I going to tell our father?" Then they killed a goat, dipped Joseph's robe in the blood, and took it to their father. They said, "We found this. See if it is your son's robe or not." Jacob recognized the robe and said, "It is my son's robe. A wild animal has devoured him." Joseph has been torn to pieces. Jacob was devastated, tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for many days. All his sons tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. he said, "I will go down to the grave mourning for my son." And even when everything seems lost, the story does not end here. Subscribe to the channel because God is still in control. Meanwhile, the merchants took Joseph to Egypt and sold him to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Genesis 39. Joseph was taken to Egypt. There, he was bought by Potiphar, an important officer of Pharaoh, who was the captain of the palace guard. Even as a slave, God was with Joseph, and everything he did prospered. Potiphar noticed this. He saw that Joseph was hardworking, intelligent, and trustworthy. So he put Joseph in charge of his household and everything he owned. From that moment on, Potiphar entrusted everything to Joseph. His house was blessed because of him. Even the work in the fields prospered. Potiphar left everything under Joseph's care and worried about nothing except his own food. Joseph was young, handsome, and strong. After some time, Potiphar's wife began to look at Joseph with desire and said, "Come to bed with me." But Joseph refused and said, "Look, my master trusts me with everything in this house. He doesn't worry about anything here. How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Even so, she insisted every day, but Joseph never gave in. If you notice how Joseph remains firm, even under pressure, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, because this attitude changes the course of the story. One day when no one else was home, Joseph came in to work, and she grabbed him by his cloak and said again, "Sleep with me." Joseph ran out, but left his cloak in her hand. She, seeing that he had fled, began to scream. She called the servants and said that Joseph had tried to disrespect her. Later she told the same story to her husband, saying that the Hebrew slave had tried to attack her. When Potiphar heard this, he became very angry. He had Joseph arrested and put in the prison where the king's prisoners were kept. But even in prison, God continued with Joseph. God made him successful even there. The prison warden liked Joseph and began to trust him. He put Joseph in charge of the other prisoners and everything that happened in the prison. Everything Joseph did prospered because God was with him. And here this part of the story ends, but the purpose is not over yet. Subscribe to the channel to keep following along, because what comes next is even more surprising. Before I begin, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, because this continuation of the story of Joseph of Egypt will show you how God transforms injustice, waiting and suffering into purpose and authority. Genesis 40. After some time, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and the baker of the king offended Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh became very angry with the two officials and had them imprisoned in the same prison where Joseph was, in the place commanded by the captain of the guard. The captain put Joseph in charge of them. And here is already an important pause. Even when it seems like nothing is happening, God is already positioning people and preparing answers. If you are following this story, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, because this is not coincidence, it is purpose. They were in prison for some time, and one night the two of them had different dreams on the same night. Joseph came into the prison in the morning and noticed that they were sad. He asked why they looked so dejected. They replied that they had had dreams, but there was no one to interpret them. Joseph then said that interpretations belonged to God and asked them to tell him the dreams. The cupbearer first told his dream, saying he saw a vine in front of him with 3 branches. The vine budded, blossomed, and produced ripe grapes. He had Pharaoh's cup in his hand, took the grapes, squeezed the juice, and handed the cup to Pharaoh. Joseph replied that the meaning was that the 3 branches represented 3 days, and that in 3 days Pharaoh would release him from prison and restore him to his position. If you're noticing how God uses even dreams to change destinies, go ahead and subscribe to the channel now, because this will repeat several times in this story. Joseph asked the cupbearer that, when everything was well with him, he would remember him and speak about his situation to Pharaoh, for he had been placed there unjustly. When the cupbearer saw that the interpretation was favorable, the baker also told his dream, saying he had 3 baskets of bread on his head. In the top basket there were baked goods for Pharaoh, but birds were eating them. Joseph replied that the meaning was that the 3 baskets represented 3 days, and that in 3 days Pharaoh would have him executed, and the birds would eat his body. 3 days later, on Pharaoh's birthday, everything happened exactly as Joseph had interpreted. The cupbearer was restored to his position, but the baker was executed. But here is a powerful detail. Even when someone promises to remember you, it doesn't always happen at the right time. If you are understanding this, subscribe to the channel. However, the cupbearer did not remember Joseph and forgot all about him. Genesis 41. After 2 full years, Pharaoh had 2 dreams in the same night. He dreamed he was standing by the bank of the Nile River. Suddenly, 7 handsome and fat cows came up out of the river and began grazing on the bank. Then 7 other cows, ugly and very thin, came up out of the same river. The thin cows devoured the fat cows, but remained as ugly as before. Pharaoh woke up startled, but he fell asleep again and had another dream. He saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. Then 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads swallowed the good ones. Pharaoh woke up, troubled, and no one could explain the dreams. Here comes a decisive turning point. What seems like forgetfulness by men is never forgetfulness by God. If you are following along, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. The next morning, they called all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, but no one could interpret. At that moment, the cupbearer remembered Joseph. Joseph was summoned, shaved, changed his clothes, and was brought before Pharaoh. Pharaoh told him the dreams. Joseph replied that it was not him who interpreted, but God. He explained that the 2 dreams had the same meaning: 7 years of abundance and then 7 years of severe famine. Joseph advised Pharaoh to store up food during the years of abundance. Pharaoh and his officials were impressed. He said, "Can we find anyone as wise as this man, in whom is the Spirit of God?" So Pharaoh appointed Joseph as governor of Egypt. He took off his signet ring, dressed Joseph in fine clothes, put a gold chain around his neck, and had him ride in a royal chariot, honored by the entire nation. If you are seeing how a prison turned into a palace, subscribe to the channel now, because this changes the way we understand waiting and delay. Joseph administered Egypt and stored up food for 7 years. Then the 7 years of famine came, and he saved entire nations. Genesis 42. When the famine spread, Jacob heard that there was food in Egypt and sent his sons, except Benjamin. Joseph's brothers arrived in Egypt and bowed down before him. And here destiny begins to align with the ancient dreams. If you are following along, subscribe to the channel. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. He spoke harshly to them and tested them, saying they were spies. They denied it and told him about their father and their younger brother. Joseph put them in prison for 3 days. Then he kept Simeon bound and sent them back with grain, but demanded that they bring Benjamin. When they returned, they discovered that their money had been returned in their sacks, and they became afraid. Jacob was desperate and refused to let Benjamin go. Genesis 43. The famine continued, and the food ran out. Judah insisted that they take Benjamin, promising to protect him. Jacob finally agreed, sending gifts and double the money. The brothers returned to Egypt with Benjamin. Joseph received them, released Simeon, and brought them into his house. And here begins one of the most emotional moments of the story. If you are following everything, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Joseph saw Benjamin and was deeply moved, but he still did not reveal himself. He prepared a banquet. The brothers seated themselves in order of age. and they were amazed. Benjamin received a larger portion, and they all ate together in peace. Genesis 44. When the meal was finished, Joseph gave an order to his steward: "Fill the men's sacks with as much food as they can carry, and put each man's money back in the mouth of his sack. Also put my silver cup in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, along with his grain money." The steward did exactly as Joseph commanded. Early the next morning, the brothers were sent on their way, but they had not gone far from the city when Joseph said to his steward, "Go after them, and when you catch up with them, say, 'Why have you repaid good with evil? Why have you stolen my master's silver cup? Isn't this the cup my master drinks from and uses for divination? You have done a very wicked thing. If you have been following along this far, leave your like and share, so more people can reflect on this story." The steward caught up with the brothers and repeated those exact words. They answered firmly that they had done nothing wrong, that they were honest men, and had even brought back the money they found in their sacks on the first trip. They said they would never do something so wrong as stealing the silver cup. They declared that if it were found with any of them, that man would die, and the rest would become slaves. The steward replied that he would accept only the guilty one as a slave, and the others would be free. Then they quickly lowered their sacks. Each one opened his sack, and they searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. When they saw this, they tore their clothes in despair, loaded their donkeys again, and returned to the city. If this story has captivated you, share it with someone who also enjoys narrated Bible stories. When they arrived at Joseph's house, he was still there. They threw themselves on the ground before him. Joseph asked what they had done and why they had not understood that someone like him would have the power to discover such things. Judah replied that there was no explanation, that God had revealed their guilt, and that they were all now his servants, including the one in whose hand the cup was found. But Joseph said that would not be so. He said that only the man with whom the cup was found would be his servant, and the rest could go back in peace to their father. Then Judah approached Joseph and spoke very respectfully, explaining their father's situation, saying that he was old and that he had a younger son who was very dear to him, and that losing that son would cause him to die of grief. Leave your like if you want this series to continue to the end. He offered to stay in Benjamin's place as a servant, saying he could not bear to see his father suffering if the boy did not return. Genesis 45. Joseph could no longer control himself in front of everyone who was with him. He ordered everyone to leave, and when he was alone with his brothers, he revealed himself to them. He began to weep so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the news reached Pharaoh's house. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is a good time to do so. Then he said, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers were so terrified in his presence that they could not answer him. Joseph asked them to come closer and said again, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land for 2 years now, and there are still 5 more years without plowing or harvest. God sent me ahead of you to preserve lives and to ensure that you and many others survive." If this message has touched you, share it with someone today. He continued, saying that it was not they who sent him to Egypt, but God who placed him there to become governor, responsible for saving lives during the famine. Then he told them to hurry back to their father and tell him that Joseph was alive and that he was governor of all Egypt. Turn on the notification bell to follow the next chapters. He asked them to bring their father, the entire family, and all their possessions to live near him. in the land of Goshen, where they would be provided for during the years of famine. Joseph then embraced Benjamin and wept with him, and he also kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Afterward, the brothers began to talk with him, no longer afraid. The news reached Pharaoh's palace, and he was very pleased. Pharaoh told Joseph to send his brothers back to bring their father and the entire family, and he promised that they would live in the best part of Egypt and receive the best of the land. He also ordered that carts be given to help with the move, and that they should not worry about their belongings, for everything would be provided. Share this video with someone in your family. Joseph then gave new clothes to his brothers, along with much food and riches, and sent special gifts to his father. He sent carts loaded with provisions for the journey, and told them not to quarrel on the way. When they arrived at Jacob's, at first he did not believe that Joseph was alive. But when he saw everything Joseph had sent and heard the full account, his spirit revived, and he said he would go to Egypt to see his son before he died. Genesis 46. Israel, Jacob, set out with everything he had and arrived at Beersheba. There he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. During the night, God spoke to him in a vision and said, "Jacob, Jacob." He answered, "Here I am." God said, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I will go with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you back. And Joseph will close your eyes when you die." So Jacob left Beersheba, and his sons took him to Egypt, along with the whole family, children, grandchildren, wives, and all their possessions. They also took their livestock and everything they had acquired in the land of Canaan. If this story is edifying you, share it with more people. These are the names of the sons of Israel who went to Egypt: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun. Sons of Leah, Joseph and Benjamin. Sons of Rachel, Dan and Naphtali. Sons of Bilhah, and Gad and Asher. Sons of Zilpah. In total, 70 people from Jacob's family went to Egypt, not counting the wives of his sons. Judah was sent ahead to tell Joseph that the family was arriving in the land of Goshen. When they arrived there, Joseph prepared his chariot and went to meet his father Israel. When he saw him, he ran, embraced his father, and wept for a long time on his neck. Israel said to Joseph, "Now I can die in peace, because I have seen your face, and know that you are still alive." Genesis 47. Joseph brought Jacob, his father, and the entire family to Egypt, and gave them land in the region of Goshen, where they could live and take care of their livestock. While the famine continued to be severe, Joseph also managed the sale of food in Egypt and other regions, and the people's money soon ran out. When the money was gone, the people came to Joseph and said they had no more to buy food. Joseph then exchanged food for livestock, horses, and other animals, until all the animals of Egypt belonged to Pharaoh. If this story is helping you understand the Bible better, subscribe to follow the continuation. When nothing was left but the land, the people said to Joseph that they had nothing else to offer except their own lives and their land. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, and the people became his servants. He organized everything so that the people could continue living and working the land, giving a portion of the harvest to Pharaoh and keeping the rest to survive. Share this video with someone who enjoys Bible studies. During this time, the people prospered again, even after the famine, because Joseph created a fair system of production and distribution. Egypt became very strong under his administration. The Israelites, however, continued to live in the land of Goshen, where they had many children and multiplied greatly. Jacob lived there for 17 years, and even in his old age he was cared for by Joseph. When Jacob realized that his life was coming to an end, he called Joseph and asked him to promise that he would not bury him in Egypt, but would take him back to the land of his fathers in Canaan. Joseph promised and swore that he would do so. Jacob then leaned on his bed and thanked God for the life he had, and for the reunion with his son Joseph before he died. Genesis 50. Joseph threw himself on his father's face, wept over him, and kissed him. After that, he ordered the physicians of Egypt to embalm Jacob, and they took 40 days to complete the process, as was the custom in Egypt. All of Egypt mourned him for 70 days. After this period, Joseph spoke with Pharaoh's officials and asked permission to take his father's body to the land of Canaan, as he had promised. Pharaoh agreed, and Joseph set out with a great retinue: his brothers, Pharaoh's servants, the leaders of Egypt, chariots and horsemen. Only the children, the sheep, and the cattle remained in the land of Goshen. If this story has impacted you, share it with more people you love. They arrived at a place called Abel Mizraim, where they held a great mourning for Jacob for 7 days. The inhabitants of the region were impressed by the weeping and said it was a very profound mourning. After that, Joseph and his brothers took Jacob's body to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which Abraham had bought as a burial site. After the burial, everyone returned to Egypt. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father had died, they became afraid and thought that now Joseph might take revenge on them for what they had done in the past. So they sent a message saying that their father, before he died, had asked Joseph to forgive his brothers. Joseph heard the message and was moved. The brothers went to him, threw themselves down before him, and said they were his servants. Joseph replied that they had no need to be afraid, because he was not in God's place to judge. He said that what they had intended for evil, God had turned into good in order to save many lives. If you are being edified, subscribe now and continue this biblical journey. He assured them that he would continue to take care of them and their families. Thus Joseph comforted his brothers and spoke kindly to their hearts. Joseph lived in Egypt with his father's family and saw his children's children grow up. He even lived to see the third generation. At the end of his life, Joseph said to his brothers that God would surely bring them back to the promised land, and asked that when that happened, they would take his bones with them. Joseph died at the age of 110. He was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt, awaiting the day when his people would be taken back to the promised land. And here's the greatest suspense of this story. What happened after Joseph's death completely changed the destiny of an entire nation. In the next video, you will see how the oppression in Egypt began and how God raises up a new liberator to fulfill the promise made to Abraham. Don't miss it, because this continuation is even more impactful.